Hi, this is Teddy. Today's episode is about Pennsylvania. Here are some facts about Pennsylvania. Capital of Pennsylvania is Harrisburg, and the largest city is Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is the fifth most populous state with nearly 13 million people. The governor of Pennsylvania is Democrat Tom Wolf. The senators are Democrat Bob Casey and Republican Pat Toomey. Pennsylvania sends 18 representatives to the U.S. House of Representatives, 10 Republicans and 6 Democrats. 2 seats are vacant. Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and today we're going to talk about the politics of Pennsylvania. And so I have with me to talk today Jane Palmer, who is the director of Indivisible Berks, and Tracy Baton, who is the director of Women's March on Washington, Pittsburgh, and the co-director of Pittsburgh Indivisible. Hi, Jane and Tracy.
Hi there.
Thanks so much for joining me. To start, let's just to give a little bit of context of how you guys got involved in politics and what part of Pennsylvania you're in. Jane, maybe you could start. Just tell us a little bit about your background with politics and organizing and where Berks is.
Yeah, Berks is the diamond-shaped county that's about 50 miles west of Philadelphia. We're in between Philadelphia and Harrisburg, and the city of Reading, that you might know from the Reading Railroad on the Monopoly Board, is right in the center of Berks County. So that's where we are. I've been politically active for as long as I can remember. In recent memory, I devoted all of 2008 to electing President Obama and the better part of 2012 to re-electing him. I worked on the Hillary campaign in 2016, and I've also done a lot of organizing around the state of Pennsylvania, most particularly the Progressive Summit, which is an annual kind of gathering that's in Harrisburg of all progressive groups that gets several hundred people in attendance, and I was the coordinator of that for several years. But, I think like so many people, I was shocked and dismayed and rendered basically comatose by the results of the election in 2016. It took me a while to scrape myself off the floor and dry my tears. And I cast about thinking about what can I do? How can I serve? How can I help people? Because I know people are going to be in trouble. What should I be doing with my time? And then I discovered this indivisible concept, and I thought, bingo. So I started a group, and now we have more than 2,000 members in Berks County, and we're pretty active.
All right, excellent. And Tracy, how about you? I assume more people might know where Pittsburgh is, but just in case anyone doesn't have an idea, what part of Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh in?
Pittsburgh is in the far corner of western Pennsylvania, and I don't think a lot of people know where Pittsburgh is because when I travel, people ask me, do I know their friends from Philadelphia? Which means they don't understand where Pittsburgh is. Pittsburgh is 6 hours drive from Philadelphia. It is much closer to Cleveland than Philadelphia, and I have to point that out to people frequently. I actually live in the city of Pittsburgh, which is really small. The county, unlike Philadelphia, Pittsburgh never took in its whole county, is much bigger. And that matters a lot because Pittsburgh is a very tiny, very progressive city in a not nearly as progressive county and in a not nearly as progressive western Pennsylvania. And those things matter for how we organize out here. So that's our political geography. I think your other question was, how did I end up doing the thing?
Yeah.
And I sometimes try to figure that out myself. And on the other hand, in some strange way, I was born to it. I was raised by hippies. I lived in a commune as a child. My mother was both Black, hippie, and politically active. She helped women deliver lunches in Oakland, California at a significant time. She moved to a commune where she got pregnant with me in New York City, and we eventually moved to Pittsburgh. She was organized throughout my life. So by the time I was in college, I helped organize to help the University of Pittsburgh divest, and we were very successful in that. I went on to be a Fulbright Fellow and do research into women's health in South Africa, and came back to my hometown pregnant and raised 3 babies. So during many of the years that other people were organizing for different campaigns, I was a stay-at-home mom growing organic vegetables and raising 3 babies here in Pittsburgh. I was on the board of some local organizations. So I did organizing like 10,000 Villages and the Soup Kitchen, but had never worked on a political campaign in that way. But when it was time, I had done other kinds of community organizing. And I'm a social worker with a degree in master's in social work, and I took classes in community organizing. So I showed up at a meeting, a last-minute meeting, organizing the Women's March here in Pittsburgh. And people from both sides of the meeting exploded. And there's a long and painful story, some of which spilled out as far as the New York Times about the first Women's March in Pittsburgh. And I ended up in many ways last woman standing and had the opportunity to decide if Pittsburgh would have a Women's March or not a week before the march. And I decided that no matter what it took, I would bleed into it. And we made it happen. That first march, we were about 20,000 out in the streets of Pittsburgh, peaceful social protest. Throughout the course of that year, we had a March for Truth. We had Pittsburgh Loves Paris. You may have seen Trump tweet out that he was elected by the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And we argued with him, and we made the national news. We had the French press here. Okay, so it's a beautiful day in your beloved hometown, and there's a French guy saying, "I never knew your city was so beautiful. It is such a blessing to be here." And I'm like, this is what I did thus far. We went on to by Women's March 2018, which was done jointly with Women's March and Indivisible here in Pittsburgh. That's how we operate. We had to decide if there was a reason to march, and we decided that Power to the Polls was reason to march. So although that was conceived of as an event that was supposed to originally happen only in Las Vegas, we decided it needed to happen in Pittsburgh. And we had a Power to the Polls event here in January, and we had more than 20,000 people there. And it was truly an extraordinary chance to talk about voter registration. We had candidates out, and it was pretty exciting. The candidates out, including Connor Lamb. And many of the people who worked with all of those actions also worked with the Lamb campaign. So that keeps us buoyed here as well.
Okay, so we've already started just in that to sort of touch on some of the topics that I think are important when thinking about Pennsylvania. So I think this idea of just the sheer size of Pennsylvania might be surprising to some people, and how different the different parts of the state can be. So maybe that's a place to start, just sort of, how are the regions different, and how does that affect the politics? That's a really broad question, but maybe we can start to sort of dig into that.
I have an idea about how to approach that. In Berks County, at the beginning of 2017, we had 4 congressional districts that were situated in Berks County. We were the poster child for gerrymandering, so that we include the infamous 7th district, which looks like Goofy kicking Donald, or Donald kicking Goofy, one of the two, the most egregiously gerrymandered district in the country. So we had these 4 congressional districts, and yet we were not a significant voting bloc for any one of those congressmen. So people didn't care. They didn't care. They literally said to us, "I have my voters. I don't need you." But as we all know, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided that those congressional maps were unconstitutional and redrew them, and now we have just 3 districts. We have the 4th, the 6th, and the 9th. And I was just looking at the Cook rating as far as how they go. So the 4th is D+7. That's Westchester, very close to Philadelphia, very progressive. Madeline Dean is the Democratic candidate there. She's got a pretty good chance. We have the 6th district, where I live personally, which was held by Ryan Costello. Ryan Costello has indicated that he's not going to run for re-election, so he's a lame duck. And the candidate there is Chrissy Houlahan, who's a very exciting candidate. That's a D+2. And then we have the new ninth, which is an enormous district. It includes parts of, I think, 6 or 7 counties. It has 650,000 people, 97% of which is white, and it R plus 14. So in Berks County, we've got all of these different kinds of campaigns that we're looking at. And like Tracy says, that those political geographies make a big difference as far as how you relate to them.
Yeah, and so it seems like this redistricting, and maybe we can dive a little more into that, but that it really threw a lot of things into disarray. I work with a group that was trying to figure out who to endorse, and we couldn't even figure out who was running in some of the districts, and people who were incumbents were no longer going to be in the district that they were already an incumbent in. So this seems like it must be rather confusing for the people who are running for office, but especially for people who are trying to figure out, what district am I now in? Who am I voting for? What kind of district does this look like?
Well, to make matters even more complicated, the governor has decided that we need a special election that will take place on the same day as the regular election. And in the special election, we will be voting for a candidate who's going to represent the old district between November and January.
Well, I probably will get it wrong, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that the congressional map violated the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling that districts had to be compact and, there's another word that means like make sense.
Well, it to be geographically contiguous, I think, and it also had to have, so each vote was equally potent.
Yeah,
that was
what
Judge Todd said. Yeah, equally potent. Yeah.
So the interesting thing is that when the court originally ruled that, the Republicans had the chance to draw up a map. Democrats drew up a map. Republicans refused to draw up a map. They just kept going back to court. There's actually another case before the Supreme Court now, but chances are it will get thrown out. But they refused to draw up a map. And the map that the courts drew up, instead of the Democrats or the Republicans, was much more, by following the court's call, it was much more favorable to Democrats than Democrats would have dreamed.
As a result, we have Republican legislators now threatening to sue members of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and it's a hot mess. But
we call it losing their minds. Republican legislatures in Pennsylvania are losing their minds because they're trying, extrajudicial processes would be fair. Anything they can come up with. In Western Pennsylvania, one of the effects is interesting because I was talking to a friend who is now in, I'm going to get the district's numbers wrong, in the new District 14, which is that lower end. If you're looking at a map of Pennsylvania, it's that lower right-hand corner of Pennsylvania. It includes Westmoreland, Fayette County. It's pretty country out there, although parts of it are still the suburbs of Pittsburgh. So the people who are in the suburbs of Pittsburgh and are now included with these rural counties are extremely upset because that new District 14 is really, really red. It might be one of the reddest districts, at least in Western Pennsylvania. But it does mean that the new District 17, which are Connor Lamb, who is nationally known now, is going to run against Guy Rothfuss, is really flippable. And out here in Western Pennsylvania, we are all backing Connor Lamb and hoping that by getting Connor Lamb to beat Guy Rothfuss in District 17, we will do our part for Pennsylvania to get what do we need, 5 or 6 seats out of Pennsylvania for the 18 seats that are in play.
And this is the U.S. congressional districts that got redrawn.
Yes.
But the state legislative districts have not been redrawn and seem to still be fairly gerrymandered.
There is currently a very dramatic, I was talking to a friend who's very involved in state-level politics, and that is a fight that is currently being fought, and being fought really in the trenches. Republican state legislatures are fighting hard against any kind of changes.
I don't know if either of you has an answer to this, but I've been looking at the gender disparity in representation in Pennsylvania and was shocked to realize how few women have represented Pennsylvania at the